Okay. Yeah, I don't think we have enough room for everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Call to order the Affordable Housing and Homeless Standing Subcommittee meeting. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Jeff Kors, and the other member of the subcommittee is Councilmember Christy Holstich. So we will start with public testimony. Just so folks know, because this is a standing subcommittee, it is recorded and videoed. So if you don't want to be videoed or recorded, you may not want to give public testimony, but we just want to make sure people know that. And it's on anything that's on the agenda. So if anyone wants public testimony, please come up. Please, just grab a seat and just hit the button on the mic so people can hear you on the recording.
Thank you. I brought a few notes.
Okay, sure.
So I wouldn't freeze on my camera debut. Thank you. My name's Mariah Ibarra. I'm a resident of Palm Springs View Estates Manufactured Home Park, and I'm our president of our homeowners organization. And I am here to talk a little bit about the computer price index topic and have a few things to say about the index adjustment. The present version of the ordinance specifies the use of the Department of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index table, and it's been from LA, Anaheim, Riverside, and the Metropolitan CPI statistical area, which we call the LA metro area. And that's what's been widely used in Southern California since it was adopted in 1980. At one point, the Bureau of Labor eventually split the LA metro area into two different CPI areas, LA Long Beach, Anaheim, and LA Riverside, Orange County. And these were the tables used to calculate the annual increases. And at that time, the change was permissible by the city code, section 4.02.040, because the basic formula criteria continued to apply as it was stated in the ordinance. At the end of 2017, the Department of Labor published a new CPI table for Riverside and San Bernardino and Ontario area, which more closely represents our living standards and the price indexes for the Inland Empire. However, the city did not use the correct CPI database when they calculated the 2019 rent increase amounts for the different manufactured home owners. And as a result, the rent increases that went out to manufactured home communities were significantly high compared to previous years. The new index has made fundamental changes to the formula parameters. The criteria to calculate the increases now is using the new Riverside index aren't interchangeable with the original ordinance. So our purpose here today is to state that the main modifications that need to be involved with changing the correct index is to change the effective date of the ordinance from September 1, 1979, excuse me, to December 2017, and change the new base rent, which was $220.7 in 1979, back to a new base number of 100, starting in December 2017. So that original ordinance was written primarily for apartment tenancies at the time when the ordinance was established. And of course, since that's happened, apartments are no longer part of the rent ordinance requirements. I think there's now 15 apartments that are under rent control here. But manufactured homes did remain under the ordinance and have been a wonderful way of stabilizing rents for folks who are retired, lots of 55 older, as well as young families, people in low, moderate income, seniors, and veterans. So just as a note, The original formula was designed to put a limitation on yearly rent increases, but also allowing adjustments for owners so that they could provide a fair return on their investment. But unlike apartment owners, park owners don't provide housing. They absolutely have nothing to do with the homes that we live in. We cover the cost, the maintenance, upkeep on our homes, and all the landowners do is collect the rents for the parcels of land. We even pay for some of our own utilities, and they do cover common areas. So the yearly adjustments that currently include housing criteria in the housing expenses in the criteria don't really apply to the operation of manufactured homes. So if you look at including these housing expenses, it translates into excess profits for these owners, and yet the homeowner bears the price of maintaining the actual home. So we have provided Director Verrata with significant research and data to more clearly demonstrate the ramifications for not adopting changes that would significantly alter and reflect the homeowners in your 658 manufactured home rental spaces. And as a person that comes from the world of housing, in my profession, I know that this city has been committed to sustaining affordable housing and as well as building new. So please, with these considerations and the data we've provided, we ask that you give it your consideration.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that, and we may call you back up when we get to that item if there are any questions. So thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to give public testimony?
My name's Kelly Dunn.
If you
I'm
could
the
just
owner of
push
Safari.
the button.
I'm the owner of Safari Mobile Home Park. So one question, how much did your rent go up?
Okay.
Sorry, if you
This
could
is
direct
public
your
comment.
Oh, okay,
questions to us.
Yeah.
A couple things. One that needs to be taken into consideration, and I understand that we're trying to help people out and with the affordability and such matters like that. Comments that are made are such that we're responsible for our home. I spent $3 million on my mobile home park in the last 4 years. The value of mobile home in my park went from $30,000 to $60,000. When they sell that mobile home for $60,000, I as a park owner get nothing. That increase goes directly to them that are selling it. Under the whole idea of affordable housing in the whole 9 yards, people, it's the lot, it's where they get, okay? There are no financial backgrounds we check and everything like that. People that are hurting, fixed income and things like that, it's now gotten to the point you can't afford to spend the $60,000 for the mobile home. Not the rent that I'm charging and the increase that I get once a year from the CPI. If you can't afford to get into the house, I don't understand where the affordable housing comes in. I've got millionaires that live on rent control property. I have no say in the matter. I have no way of checking, their background. Here you go. Well, you qualify, you get it. You can own 3 or 4 lots. You can own 3 or 4 mobile homes in my park and charge with, because you own them and they're on rent control property. When it comes down to the CPI, and you and I were talking before the meeting, the CPI, basically, we've got to give 3 months notice to all the residents. Here's what the CPI is, and that's given to us in the last couple of years from Jay and his people, okay? Here's what the increase is. I believe last year was $7.32 at the most, and that was the high end, okay? We pay $5 to administrate rent control. I have to administrate rent control for the city of Palm Springs. The residents pay $5 to administrate rent control. So throw that into the $7 that we made on rent increase, and I would hope that you would take that into consideration. There's a lot of areas that go into these mobile home parks where your CPI or however we want to look at it and figure it, make it fair, don't work out. We've recently had 3 major floods in the last few years, and I believe we were on TV quite a bit. And I sat outside my mobile home park with the chief of police and the chief of the fire department. And the guy just looked at me and he goes, "Man, that's a bummer." And I go, "Yeah, it is." And he goes, "Well, good luck to you." And I go, "Yeah, thanks." I'm considered private property. So the city won't come in and clean up, help do emergency cleanup. So I've got tractors in there, scurrying in there, getting all the stuff, getting all the mud, getting all the dirt out. They put the mud over in Indian land that we have a lease on. 4 days later, I got a note from the code department of the city of Palm Springs that I had 2 weeks to get it out of there, or they're going to fine me on a daily basis.
Okay, can we, just for,
Okay.
we have a big agenda, if we can just focus
Okay,
on
well, I
the rent
just-
increase, we're happy to meet with you separately on any other issues.
Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry to drag it out.
No,
But
it's okay.
one last thing about the CPI
Yeah.
is you do the CPI, and because you've got to give 3 months notice to the tenants on the rent increase, we're basically only using September.
Okay.
So it doesn't, we're talking about Riverside or we're talking to them, it's September. I think it should be considered maybe a breach agreement, but shouldn't be able to take the high or the mid for the year?
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has some public comment on an agenda item? Yeah. And normally it's 2 minutes where, we let people talk longer at subcommittees. We want to be conscious that we have an hour to get through a pretty big agenda. So if people can just keep it as concise as possible, that would be appreciated.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilperson Christie, and staff. My name's John Pavlak. I'm a resident. My wife and I and my daughter own a house at Mountain Gate here, but it's the first time at a subcommittee meeting, but I just wanted to introduce myself again. And then also, we're concerned about the affordability and homelessness and so forth, and we kind of watermark things outside the box and so forth there, and we've done a lot of different things. We've got also another entity that does, kind of a lifestyle-built home that's prefabbed in a factory and so forth there. But I did want to bring it up. Also in that affordability is, and I've worked with Jay there on the new market tax credits. There's also some opportunity zones and so forth there. So there's a lot of different financing out there available, and so just wanted to thank you for letting me come and speak
No,
up.
thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else who wants to make public comment? Okay, thank you. So let's move. We have a presentation.
That is correct. We have Estelano Lasar Advisors and Lasar Development Consultants, Leah Hubbard, Chris Kuntz, Rachel Ralston, if you guys want to come up. A few subcommittees ago, we were asked to bring forward some information, folks who had experience in the affordable housing development world, and some knowledge of the legislation at the state level. And so these teams were good enough to come to us just to share some information with us.
Great, thank you so much. Please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
There we go.
perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Rachel Ralston. This is my colleague Chris Kuntz from Lasar Development Consultants, our colleague Leah Hubbard from Estelano Lasar Advisors. Just to give you a real quick overview, so our firm focuses on affordable housing and homelessness issues, particularly with governments, nonprofits, and philanthropy. Estelano Lasar does a lot of work around economic and workforce development, green initiatives, active transportation, and urban planning activities. So I know there's a lot of overlap in cities with addressing those issues, and so we're happy to answer any questions kind of cross sectors for you. But we were asked, as Jay just said, to come and share a little bit about our work. I think one of the things that applies both to Palm Springs and the Coachella Valley, some of the issues with the funding coming down from the state, how that requires partnerships with the county or your continuum of care, and then also just some of the issues around affordable housing and homelessness. Affordable housing and supportive housing development specifically in this area as they relate to rural communities and some of the work we've done in Riverside. So I'm going to let my colleague Chris talk a little bit more about that.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Chris Kuntz. And so
I'll talk a little bit about some projects we've done recently, and then I think kind of open it up for discussion from you all. So, like Rachel said, we've been working with the city of Riverside for the last, about 18 months now. We helped with them with a permanent supportive housing first plan that they are now since kind of moving forward on, and it is really looking at how they develop supportive housing, affordable housing with services targeted folks who are experiencing homelessness. So we help with that plan, and we've been staying on with the city to help do a lot of kind of advising, training to some of their nonprofits and some of their city staff that actually provide direct services. We interact with the county there, as kind of with the city there. But we have offices in San Diego and Los Angeles in the Bay Area. So we do a lot of work across Southern California on homelessness issues. In San Diego, we do a lot of work with the city there, and do a lot of work in Los Angeles. And we've been interested in a lot of kind of housing dollars, or how we figure out how we address homelessness. Funding on the housing kind of side of the house is the state has stepped up lately. There's a lot of money at the state level that's kind of flowing for homelessness and housing, but we've been working with a large health plan. So I think the fact that how's the healthcare sector and other sectors that touch homelessness kind of get involved and support, and whether they're using Medicaid, Medicare, other kind of sources of funding to address homelessness. I think that's so we've been doing some work with a large health plan across the California and nationally on how they think about addressing homelessness. And I think those are opportunities across Riverside County to engage, health sectors and things like that. So I'm going to stop there for now, and I think we want to answer questions.
Did you have any questions for the team here? They were good enough to come up from their different locations. And I when I learned you had experience with Riverside, I know we're actually speaking with Riverside County quite a bit on some of the affordable housing and homeless funding opportunities. My understanding is they first make a stop at the county level, and then the county may issue RFPs for local governments to apply for. And so we want to be careful to get on to the county's list of interested vendors for opportunities like that. But if there's any more you can share on that, or if the subcommittee has any specific questions regarding the work you've done, I think that'd be good.
If you could just go more in depth about the work that you've done in Riverside and
Sure.
and then also cities like ours, if you've worked in smaller cities. I heard that you've sort of given technical assistance on some of the issues that you mentioned, but more in depth about the projects that you're working on and how you could assist our city.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so with Riverside, we've been working with their city department, but they created an office of homeless solutions there, and so they created a kind of a department within city government that really focuses on homelessness. And so as we originally started with them on this supportive housing plan. So Riverside, kind of going back to about 2017, had roughly about 400 people living outside any given time, right? Point in time count figures for the city. And so they were trying to, and most of those folks were living along the riverbed, sleeping in tents, had a lot of challenges, right? Whether it's drug addiction, whether it's mental illness, folks that were kind of need a lot of support. And so supportive housing is a best practice at the national level to address that group of folks. And so Riverside reached out to us to help them with a plan to create supportive housing. And what they really wanted to do is not just concentrate that type of housing in one part of the city. So they kind of wanted to have an equitable approach to kind of have every kind of council ward that they call in Riverside kind of do their share, right? So they looked at different land kind of parcels in each part of the city, and we helped them put together a plan for them to create enough supportive housing to meet that 400 kind of person target. So,
There's one question
Jump
on
in there.
that. So where did the funding come from to the city of Riverside in order to build all that housing?
Yeah, so good question. So some of that is kind of undetermined. I think they were kind of forward thinking and kind of trying to lay the foundation for it as they knew some of this new state money was going to be dropping. So, they had some money from the city, local dollars, but then they were also figuring out how they could kind of use that to leverage new funding from the state.
So is there thought, so they have that ready, so when the county hopefully applies for it and gets money for the Coachella Valley for a change, that might help us be in front of it. Is that sort of the thinking?
That was their thinking, right? Is that they could lay the foundation right now, kind of get their parcels identified, get the community to really buy in, and kind of get the council and the mayor to say, yes, this is something that we want to do, and kind of lay that foundation and get everyone's kind of get folks to agree to it, and then as this money has come, and they're chipping away, right? This is not they're not going to do this overnight, right? This is they're looking at more of a 10-year type plan to bring these units online.
Was that only permanent supportive housing or other type of housing for homeless people as well? So have you done work around crisis beds or
Absolutely, yeah.
other type of housing?
Sure. So with the city of Riverside, we help them with this supportive housing plan. Since they've hired us back on to do a variety of work with their access center there that has shelter beds. We've been working with the city of Pomona in kind of the eastern edge of LA County to help them create a roughly 200-bed shelter there. So we've been doing a lot of work around shelters. I've worked with the city of San Diego, and they've put up some tent-like structures. So we've done a lot of work around emergency shelter, crisis housing. My background, I kind of worked in a large nonprofit for many years in San Diego, and actually at what point I was coming up to Martha's Village and Kitchen a lot to work with their shelter programs. I did a lot of the training, kind of evaluation work for Martha's, now 6-7 years ago now. But yeah, so very familiar with shelter models, rapid rehousing, supportive housing, doing a lot of work in Riverside right now about encampment and unsheltered work. So how police department kind of works with, nonprofit kind of street outreach workers to really think through how we, take folks out of, that are living in some pretty tough encampments and try to bring them inside. So.
We don't have a lot of time, but if you could also touch on some of the strategies and the successful projects you've been involved with for producing new affordable units. In addition to alleviating the homelessness crisis, we also have RENA goals to hit, and there's no harm in additional production. If you guys have examples on that and some ways you could guide us in maybe securing more funds or obtaining more resources in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all, except for Leah, Chris and I are both kind of from the homelessness side, so we focus primarily on that. We do have a housing team, including who can do underwriting and pro formas, et cetera, for affordable housing deals. Also have people do land use zoning analyses on all of the planning around development. We just recently assisted the city of Berkeley, I think, with something. I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but it was well over 300 units of affordable housing. A long fight with that as well. Let's see, what else have we done? Well, we've done a lot of housing plans, and then one of the things that we did for Riverside was not just their permanent supportive housing strategy, but then we also put together a funding plan. And that's under review. We've done that for the county of Napa. We've actually been doing a lot of work right now in some of the Bay Area counties around disaster recovery and how to get units online with more innovative ideas. We just recently helped Del Mar meet their RENA goals. They had to build, 22 units of affordable housing in 5 years. So, it wasn't exactly a huge challenge, but, as you know, the community, some of their council members, there's a lot of education that went into that. So again, a lot of negotiation, a lot of educating up. And then also meeting with the community and figuring out what was going to be acceptable where. So I think those are some recent examples. I'd say one of the things that we've probably done most of is assisting with the funding strategy and then how best to meet the RENA goals, which, as most jurisdictions know, can be pretty impossible in the time frame given. And so, yeah, we've done a lot of work around that with just planning to at least get those goals underway. So.
Can you say more when you mean funding strategies? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so monitoring existing sources. So, I mean, if you want to build new units, right, you're going to have a certain type of funding available to you. If you're going to, build a tax credit property, that's going to involve an entire different partnership structure. If you're going to be looking at, maybe project basing your vouchers from your housing authority, just kind of understanding how there's, the what is it, the 811, is that the vouchers from HUD, versus, some of the more Section 8 tenant-based and rolling some of those over. So basically, when we're looking at funding plans, we're looking at how many units are you looking to build of each type, and what's the feasibility of development given whatever the capital dollars are available from investors, whatever city funds are available, maybe from CDBG, like I said, just any of those. So putting together the actual strategy for them, potentially sample pro formas. As you know, I think a lot of people think that development just, should happen overnight, and we know that it doesn't. There's a number of stages with that, not even getting into CEQA. But when we have some opportunities there, right, with some of the by right development and initiatives like around that coming down from the state. So the funding strategies don't just look at funding, but they also look at the feasibility of doing that, given the laws, the zoning, and then whatever the city-specific issues are. So.
And how frequently do you work at the city level versus the county level versus at an association of governments level? And sort of have you looked at regions like ours, or done work in regions like ours where we have 9 cities? We have CVAG, which doesn't do housing, and sort of the county, which we had a meeting earlier today about the county sort of failing their obligations to do homelessness and housing. So do you have advice about that, what we should be doing at the city level and that type of planning?
Yeah, I would say that city-county dynamics are not unique to Riverside County, right? So we do a lot of work in Los Angeles, same kind of issues, right? And I would say kind of elsewhere across the state. We were just working with a community in Southern Oregon, same thing, So again, not unique. I think there are some good examples of how cities start to partner, with counties, and I think there's also opportunities as kind of coalitions of cities kind of come together too. So some work that we've done lately, we in 2018 we helped 17 cities across the San Gabriel Valley. We were working for the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments in Los Angeles County to kind of create homeless plans for cities, but then also kind of tie it together at a regional level. And we also do some work with in Los Angeles County with the San Fernando Valley Council of Governments. So we kind of lead their homeless kind of coordination type work for the Council of Government. So, and we've done work with other counties. We do work with the continuums of care, which is, in Riverside, your county is your continuum of care, which is kind of HUD's jurisdiction. I do work for HUD as a national TA provider for the continuum of care program. So I was in Nashville a couple weeks ago, doing work for their continuum of care and elsewhere. So kind of, obviously the role of cities is very different than the role of counties. And I think and then generally the money doesn't kind of, it's not the same either, right? So cities don't have kind of usually the amount of resources that counties do. And so they're going to figure out what is the role of cities, what is the role of counties, where do these things kind of come together to really create, the right type of partnerships. And I think a lot of that is aligning the vision and aligning the goals and, I think sitting together, right, and really having good conversations.
Thank you. I'm also the vice chair for the City of Palm Springs for the CVAG, Coachella Valley Association of Governments Homelessness Committee. So I'm asking some questions for that too. That's helpful for us to think about. Thank you.
It sounds like that's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you
Thank
coming.
you, yeah.
Thank you all.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next is a budget update.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. In regards to the budget update, this is more of a touch base as we finalize our upcoming two-year budget. But I think, as you know, but the public may not know, a lot of the budget items for programs don't necessarily show up on the individual pages that we have as we operate our budget. So I just wanted to call out some things that are in the budget currently, in where it says Hauser Successor Project. Really, you see some very standard expenditures, legal services, contractual services, and at the bottom, towards the bottom of the FY20 column, you will see the $2.4 million we have allocated for the 60-unit affordable housing project that was approved for Indian and San Rafael. What you don't typically see on this page, or even in the homelessness program page, is the expenditures for the police department, which is anticipated to be in excess of $800,000. Our drop-in centers, which come from another source, which is around $75,000, and our contribution to CVAG, which runs around $103,000, and in total, homelessness expenditures get to be approximately $1.6 million. Just want to touch base on that.
Sure, thank you. And just for folks who are here or people who will watch this, on the homelessness front, and if you read the paper or watched the news tonight, there'll be lots of stories on this, but one of the things we've been trying to do some education about is the county is, both under state statute and case law, the entity that is responsible for homelessness, poverty, mental health. They get tens of millions of dollars from the state and federal government to do those programs. They don't give the city any of that money. The city doesn't have access to government funding for those programs. Cities don't have social service departments in the Coachella Valley. That's all the county. A lot of people think the city is responsible because we spend $1.6 million this last year to supplement what the county's doing. The Desert Healthcare District, as a result of a request from Palm Springs, supplements about $2 million for the whole valley. Ours is all focused in Palm Springs. The county, in the meantime, has actually dropped their funding. So our goal was to supplement, not replace, and that's sort of where we've been having meetings with the county over the last several months and several years, but to really talk to them about their both legal and moral obligations to deal with homelessness at appropriate levels. They are the funding entity, and so it comes up in a couple of ways, and I just want to explain the budget a little bit. The county has mental health housing crisis teams, folks who go out in the field, meet with homeless people, try and build trust over time and get people into services and hopefully eventually housing. The county has underfunded the Coachella Valley, we believe significantly, and had one two-person team for the entire Coachella Valley. And you can think about the size of the Coachella Valley. So we stepped up in 2016 with a couple things. First, we hired our own crisis team, which also includes a community officer from the police department who's trained in working with the homeless community to get people into services. The result of that was very effective, and the Desert Healthcare District has matched our funding. So we now have two teams on the ground just in Palm Springs. And through that, we have been able to transition people into housing and into programs. We do contribute to CVAG's Housing First program, which has also been very successful. All these things need to be at a higher scale than they are, but they're programs that are effective. The Desert Healthcare District has also matched us in providing wraparound services. So case managers, employment specialists, so to help people get jobs, help people to get the benefits that they deserve, make sure people get onto health insurance. So we funded that at Roy's when that homeless shelter was open before the county closed it, and it was also very effective. So the Desert Healthcare District is matching that as well. So those are some of the things we're funding. Where we've been really pushing the county to step up is, they closed Roy's which was an emergency shelter, which provided at least crisis housing beds in the evenings. The summer of 2017, right at the beginning of the summer, not the ideal time to have done that. And we're going into our third summer with the county not providing a single crisis bed overnight in the western Coachella Valley. And so we have been meeting with Supervisor Perez and his staff to get them to take a leadership role in that. We're happy to partner with them, and we had our first, I think, productive meeting today. And we have follow-up phone calls on Friday to really focus on how that's going to happen. And ultimately, it's up to the county whether they want to have a temporary space for people to go during extreme weather, whether they want to do hotel and motel vouchers. There are a lot of different strategies. They have a lot of staff who does this, but we are really working to get the county to meet their obligations. It's just not morally acceptable to have 3 summers go by with no place for people to go. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that.
If I could just add, because we haven't said this here, we recently merged our homelessness and affordable housing subcommittee. So that's why you see now, we used to separate it out and we were each on one and we've both been on them, but we decided as a city, really homelessness and housing are one and the same and we have to talk about this. They're different, but they have similarities and we have to talk about housing when we're talking about homelessness. So that's some of the work we're doing with the county as well. And some of the problem is that there isn't a regional entity who is doing housing in addition to homelessness. So we're continuing to try to merge those two issues, and that's what we're talking about today. And if you have any questions about the budget that we're spending on homelessness or housing, please let us know. There's copies of this for the public, right? So there are copies there. It looks like we might need additional copies, so we can get you those as well at the end of the meeting, if that works.
Yeah, okay. So why don't we move on to rent control index adjustment?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think this was fairly well presented by Ms. Ibarra already, so I'm just going to jump into some of the issues we are facing because of the elimination of the Los Angeles Riverside Orange County Index, and which had been split into 2 indexes. And the problem we are finding is that the way our municipal code is written, there is a specific reference to a base rent index from September 1979 in the Los Angeles index. And if you deal much with statistics and tables and such, you'll know that you just can't jump from one table to the other. So compounding the problem is that the Riverside County Index was not in existence until January 1st, 2018. And so there's no history to it that we can do a crosswalk back to 1979 or such. Now, there were some good suggestions as to just start over, just do December 2017 equals 100, there's your index, and incrementally increase from there, which is fine. We, however, have been advised by our city attorney not to stray too much, or stray at all, from the Measure H that established the formulas. So we need to identify where we can make changes versus where our hands are tied because of the voter-approved nature of this. Yeah.
And for the members of the public, and I've actually litigated under rent control ordinances. I bring a lot of experience on this issue. I'm still wrapping my head around all that's happened for the Palm Springs rent control ordinance. So can you just give a short background for the members of the public who are listening, who might not know how CPI fits into it, but really the short history of our rent control ordinance?
Sure. Well, I think it was 1979, the voters of Palm Springs implemented rent control in the city. But then later in 1990, the voters implemented rent decontrol. And so as rent decontrol took place, the way it operated was once an individual vacated a unit, an apartment unit, that unit would become decontrolled and go to market rate. However, with mobile home parks, the space was on rent control. And it remains so even as people moved out, I believe. So it,
So let me just ask, so that was based on that not being part of the 1990 ballot measure?
no,
Which got
I
rid of
believe
vacancy?
it was.
Oh, and it kept it,
I think there's some state conflict with the way the city's ballot measure had moved forward, that there's a different set of rules for mobile home parks.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
State law does not allow rent control of non-mobile home residential dwelling.
Already existing, right? Yeah.
Right, okay. And so as where we are now, I think we've got 13 apartments that are rent controlled, and yet 658 in mobile homes that are still on rent control.
So 13, not apartment buildings, just
Apartment
units?
units.
Units, so people haven't moved out yet.
Correct.
Okay.
And so with that, we got to this point where we do have to provide notice to the landlords as to what the CPI increase will be. Effectively, it is September because it's the month prior to the notification time, and the 3 months that was referred to is typically in October to notify tenants of a January 1 rent increase.
I was going to clarify, it's correct that we need to stick to Measure H. It's an ordinance, and it not only is it an ordinance, but it's initiative ordinance, which means the city council cannot just go and amend it. However, fortunately, it does provide for some flexibility. You'll notice at the end of the quoted language of the ordinance, it references that if that index is discontinued, the city can use another index and even use adjustment to make it mostly analogous to the previous index. So fortunately, we do have a little bit of flexibility because what we're seeing with the Riverside Index is it's skewed because it's not, if you try and tie it to the base of 1979, it's skewed. So we've got a couple of options. We could go with the Los Angeles index, just stick with the Los Angeles index, even though there's one that is more geographically closer. Another option would be to use the Riverside Index, but as Jay mentioned, kind of start afresh, start all over again with a new base. And now that we're into 2019 and we're starting to see the CPI from 2018 when it was first established, we can kind of gauge where we might want to set that. So those are a couple of options. Another option is just to not use the CPI, but to use some other price index. There's the LIBOR, there are other indexes that the city could look at if you want to give us direction to look into those.
So just, are other cities sort of in the new Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario area dealing with this, and what are they doing?
I don't know. There are not a whole lot of cities. I know Calamasa has mobile home rent control. I don't know what their ordinance says.
I haven't seen any other cities, specifically cities that have this formula,
Okay.
where it's tied to a decades ago base year and has a multiplication factor of 75. So,
Got it. Okay.
and these are what I believe is part of the voter-approved formula.
Yeah, no, that's, and what would the impact, like, how do we set it back to a new base? How would that work exactly?
I'm not an economist, but we would basically go and look and probably see what it was in 2018, at the beginning of 2018, use that as the base, and if we have enough information by June or July when we need to provide the information to the mobile home
So-
park owners, we might be able to use that.
So would we take what they're now paying, or what they were paying in 20, whatever that date is, and then the increases would be based on the increases in the new Riverside, Ontario one?
Correct.
It wouldn't lower any.
Correct,
right?
correct. The formula would be the same, it's just the numerator would change in terms of what we're using for the CPI in the ordinance's formula.
Just with a little bit we know about this, it seems we should be using the Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario formula, but doing it at a rate that, starting at a fair rate. So we're not going back, lowering the rate that, right, people have been paying for the owner of the property.
And I think Measure H allows the city to
Right.
do that.
Okay.
I agree. I see a comment here. If you want to make a brief comment, I don't want to fully open it up, but I will allow.
That's in line with what you were just speaking about.
Could you use the mic, please? We're recording. You seem like quite an expert, so I wanted to hear what you had to say.
I've been a technical assistance provider for many years. And this is my field. I really do have concerns about affordable housing. The way the current formula is structured is that 75% of the allowable percentage increase from the base year CPI to the current CPI is used to calculate the dollar increase from the base year amount. It's quite a complicated formula. This amount then is added to the base year to determine the maximum allowable gross rent. Then there are park owners who have been approved for hardship increases over the years, so that's added to that. And then, of course, the city pass-through registration fees. So it's not just the CPI, it's really understanding that formula and the fact that other costs come into play, and that the CPI is developed based on housing costs where they don't really apply in the case of manufactured housing.
Great. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Did anyone else have any comment?
You have to come up if
You have to
want.
come up if you'd like to speak, and then we'll close it.
Pretty quick. Increases they've been asked for in the last 10 years.
I know of one.
I think we're, yeah.
It costs thousands and thousands of dollars for a park to apply for a hardship increase.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
CPI is,
Yeah, so it's really just figuring out the CPI, so thank you. Yeah, that's what I think we're focused on. So it seems we should, find the right date to start it at what people were paying, and then increases should be based on our regional CPI.
I agree.
Yeah, so, and that has to come to council, right, I assume?
I think that'd be the safest
Yeah,
way to
okay.
proceed.
And just, so everyone's clear, I think you mentioned, the city attorney mentioned it, but when something's passed at the ballot, there's very little you can do to change it without going back to the ballot. So we have a little flexibility here if the index changed, which it did. So I think I agree with you. I think that probably is a good way to do it.
And we've
Okay.
talked at this subcommittee many times about our options, about changing this initiative because of state law, essentially restricting cities' ability to impact rent control, as well as the initiative that was voted by the people that we respect. So we have had those conversations before, just so you know, but this is a really narrowed conversation about the CPI and the increases. So just to be clear, so that recommendation will go forward to the full city council, so the public will have an opportunity to respond and give public comment at that time, right?
Yeah, yes, staff, the city attorney's office, and we might bring in somebody with more expertise on how the Bureau comes up with the CPI. We can come up with a recommendation, bring it back to city council.
Terrific.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone who came on that issue. Legislative update and possible new ordinances. Is there anything? Because
Actually, this was for the subcommittee to bring up items for, if you'd like staff to follow up on or discuss with the public.
So we've had a number of them from the past meetings that we've held.
Right.
So if we could look back at all of the requests in the past at either city council level or at this subcommittee level, and then bring those forward to a regular standing subcommittee meeting,
Right.
that would be great.
Of course,
Yeah.
we can do that.
yeah,
Sure.
and that way we can evaluate them and make recommendations to move things forward to council.
Now,
And get
did
public
you
comment.
want to focus on any particular area, such as funding or regulations, discrimination areas?
I mean,
that
one
we would
we
discuss about?
we definitely wanted to focus on is banning discrimination, income-based discrimination in housing. You know, people are denied apartments and based on their income often, and there are cities that have passed those laws have been successful. It really impacts, especially when we have the housing vouchers to try and get people who are currently unsheltered into housing. It really becomes a problem, and so I know we have some models of that, but it'd be great to bring one forward that we could get public input on at the next meeting. And so we could then have a recommendation to bring to council.
Very good.
That's the main one that
right,
we
yeah.
requested. Just for the public, it's income source. So
Right,
it's
income
for
source,
people with
right.
vouchers, though you legally can discriminate based on the
Yes, you
amount
can.
of income you have to
Yes.
rent. But the source of people, we know that there are 20 or 25 families in Palm Springs who have vouchers, but no landlord will accept them, like Section 8 vouchers. So this would, like the city of LA has banned landlords from refusing to accept people based on how they pay
Right, the
for
income
rent.
source, yes. Thank
Income
you.
source.
And I think in an ordinance and in findings, we should really point out the success that other cities have had in that, as well as, you know, the data that we have through our homelessness work that when people have vouchers, their rent is actually always paid. They don't have that problem. When we have guaranteed vouchers for a year or for someone, you know, we need to educate the landlords, and the ordinance and a council meeting, when that happens, is a good opportunity for us to do some more public education on that.
So I would like when that item comes forward to talk both about income source discrimination limits, but also landlord incentives, because what we hear, and that 2025 number is just people who are homeless who have vouchers right now. That's not even the renter pool of people who we know are trying to rent. But if there are landlord incentive programs that other cities use to incentivize landlords to take vouchers, that would be good to look at as
Yeah.
well.
Okay, great.
Very good.
Any subcommittee comments?
The only question I have is about the just regular meetings. I think it's been a while since we had just a meeting around affordable housing. And so if we want to merge all of that together in our homelessness task force, or if we want to set regular meetings
Yeah.
for affordable housing.
I think we probably should have, I mean, even though it's a joint standing subcommittee, I think we should have separate meetings
I
that just
agree.
focus on affordable housing.
And given the number of people
Yeah.
here, I think there's a lot of interest in this topic. So it would be good to have just
Right. Uh-huh.
regular meetings at established times so that people can plan on that.
Right. And the one thing I had is a member of the Sustainability Commission, we were doing interviews for those positions, brought up that, you know, economic sustainability is somewhat under their purview. And so whether we, you know, want to invite someone to this, whether it's more appropriate at the meeting we're going to have in about 4 minutes, but just that I wanted to mention to staff to think about, and we can talk about offline, but to think about how we incorporate them, because there are sustainability issues tied to both. And I think they have an interest in at least being present and being involved.
Sure.
Okay. So we can do public comment on non-agenda items if anyone wants to do that. Okay, if not, we will adjourn this meeting, and if folks want to stay in a minute, we have our Economic Development and Business Retention Subcommittee meeting starting at 5.